The Kevin Durant rumors are alive and well, and this time the Memphis Grizzlies are involved. That's the talk around the league today, and we're going to talk about if Kevin Durant is a fit with the Memphis Grizzlies coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Locked On Grizzlies fans? I am your host, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee, covering your Grizzlies. It's been a rather, loud at times, quiet at times, off-season in Memphis, contract extensions for Morant, contract extension for John Conchar, the Jaren Jackson Jr. injury news, and a very, lengthy summer league and draft process. So we saw the Grizzlies add 2 first-round picks, 2 second-rounders, and an undrafted guy in Kenneth Lofton Jr. that is creating some buzz as well. But more than anything, the offseason talk around the entire league has been centered around one player, and that's Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant requested a trade, to the surprise of many, about a month and a half, 2 months ago in late June, early July. And when he requested that trade, it became one of the weirdest situations in NBA history because Kevin Durant recently signed an extension last offseason that pays him, over $40 million per year in the next 4 seasons. So he has 4 years left on his current deal, and he requested a trade. That's the new NBA for you. That's the player freedom that we have here today. But with Kevin Durant requesting a trade with 4 years left on his contract, it has created a substantial amount of value that the Nets want in return for any Kevin Durant trade package. But not here to talk about Kevin Durant trade packages around the league. We're here to talk about why one team, the Memphis Grizzlies, according to Shams over at The Athletic, the Grizzlies are involved in Kevin Durant talks. So let's rewind the clock a little bit. Early July, late June. The Kevin Durant rumors, when they first came out, there wasn't much to it more than the Phoenix Suns and the Miami Heat. There were reports indicating that the Heat and the Suns were his 2 preferred destinations. People were building trade packages around those teams, but other people were, throwing things out there in terms of just rumors of, what would KD look like on this team, that team. One of those teams was the Memphis Grizzlies. We talked about it here on Locked On Grizzlies in the past. What would KD look like on the Grizzlies? What would it take? We've done past episodes about that. And that was because when Kevin Durant first requested his trade, it was a big deal. It's a big deal league-wide, and the Grizzlies were one of the teams who were thought to be able to put a package together that could acquire him. But a lot has happened since that time. More than anything, the main thing that has happened, a Rudy Gobert trade to the Minnesota Timberwolves. So you're probably asking, what? Okay, Rudy Gobert. What does Rudy Gobert have to do with Kevin Durant? When the Utah Jazz traded Rudy Gobert, the Jazz got back 5 players. The Jazz got back 5 players and 5 first-round picks. It was unheard of value for what many think is, a great defensive center. He's definitely that, but 5 players, 5 first-round picks. The Rudy Gobert trade completely changed the market on how, players, will be traded. Superstar players, that is. And we're not talking about just a bunch of scrubs. Patrick Beverley was involved in this trade, a starter for the Timberwolves. Malik Beasley, who Grizzlies fans saw was one of the best three-point shooters on that Timberwolves team and kind of their spark plug off the bench. Walker Kessler was their first-round pick. Jared Vanderbilt, another starter from this Timberwolves team, who was very athletic and a big part of containing Ja Morant at the rim. 2023 first round pick, 2025 first round pick, 2027 first round pick, 2029 first round pick. So, NBA rules, you can't trade back-to-back first round picks of your own. So Timberwolves said, okay, we'll give you 2023, skip a year, 2025, skip a year, then 2027, then 2029. And they did a pick swap in 2026, which is what you can do in those gap years. You can do a pick swap. So 4 first round picks outright to the Jazz and a pick swap on top of that. That Rudy Gobert trade completely shifted the market. And it gets us back to Kevin Durant. Any Kevin Durant trade at this point, if Gobert's going for 5 first round picks, you're talking at least 5 or 6. If whether it's 4 straight up first round picks where you go 2023, 25, 27, 29, and a couple pick swaps in there, plus player capital on top of that. So this Kevin Durant trade, just talking to people around the league, they think it could be one of the biggest trades ever. And it gets us back to the Grizzlies. So another thing that was reported in the Athletics report of KD in the Grizzlies being involved in Kevin Durant trade talks, was the Grizzlies want to build their trade package around their draft picks, which is good, good to hear necessarily from the Grizzlies fan perspective, because it means that they're emphasizing keeping their core together, which is also something that the Athletic reported. The Athletic reported that the Grizzlies are not inclined at the moment to put Desmond Bane or Jaren Jackson Jr. in a deal. So what does that mean? Well, luckily for the Grizzlies, they do have a lot of other attractive players. But unluckily for the Grizzlies, this is Kevin Durant we're talking about. This is some 1-2-time All-Star, a guy who, just is coming off a career year, and you feel like, oh, he has sky-high potential, and you're trying to bet on him. No, this is a former NBA scoring champion. This is a guy who went to the NBA Finals, at the age, I believe he was 23, 22 years old, his first NBA Finals appearance. So arguably one of the greatest scorers the game's ever seen. NBA champion, went toe-to-toe with Giannis Antetokounmpo a couple seasons ago when the Bucks won the NBA championship while dealing with, injuries to Kyrie Irving and James Harden in that series. So this is arguably the best player in the world. Picks probably aren't going to get it done. I mean, the draft capital is, it is tantalizing. As we just said, Rudy Gobert set the market. He completely reshifted how superstar trade value is looked at. And the thing about Kevin Durant still is he has 4 years left on his contract. So from the Nets perspective, put yourself in the Nets' shoes, because it's easy to look at it from the Grizzlies fans' perspective and say, oh, we're going to throw a bunch of picks at them, and we're going to throw a couple young players, Zaire Williams, who had an encouraging, season last year, or one of our first-round picks, David Roddy, Jake LaRavia, and we're going to match some salary, and we're going to throw some guys out there, and boom, we have a deal. Well, it's not going to be that easy, because if you look at it from the Nets' perspective, the Nets can just say, he has, 4 years left on this deal? We can just sit back and wait this thing out until we get the deal that we want. We don't have to be in a rush. Give the perfect example of that situation. As many of the Locked On Grizzlies viewers, before I moved back to Memphis, my native town here, Memphis, Tennessee, I was in Philadelphia for 2.5 years at the Philadelphia Inquirer. The big talk in Philadelphia at that time was Ben Simmons, his trade request. We saw all of that play out. And I'm going to take you back to a moment in time. This was last summer. Reports indicated that the Indiana Pacers were offering Malcolm Brogdon in a first-round pick for Ben Simmons. So a lot of people at that time were saying, oh, that's a good pick for what you can get for Ben Simmons right now, because he's not playing. So if he's not playing, you just need to get what you can take. But again, from the Sixers perspective, they said, This guy has what, three years left on his contract, and we don't have to trade him right now. We don't have to trade him next week. We don't have to trade him next month. We can completely wait this out until we get the trade package that we desire. And while at that time during the summer, when the Sixers were engaged with the Houston Rockets for James Harden, it was believed that they would have to include Tyrese Maxey in a potential deal. Well, as time unfolded and the Sixers, as they should have, they waited it out and they ended up trading Ben Simmons to acquire James Harden and didn't have to give up Tyrese Maxey in that deal. So with all that being said, it goes back to the point here. The Nets are going to wait this thing out if they want to. And that only means they're going to be very firm on their asking price when it comes to Kevin Durant. Will the Grizzlies be able to match that? We're going to find out real soon. But so let's talk about that. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about potential trade packages that the Grizzlies could offer up. There are certain players who would have to be involved. We're going to talk about that after the break. But before we talk about that, I want to talk to you about Rocket Money, because you may remember Rocket Money as Truebill, because if you keep on saving and saying you need to make a budget, and you never do it, and you keep missing credit card payments, you don't want to look at your bank statements. It's time for you to take back control of your financial life. And then to do that, you need to meet Rocket Money. This is formerly Truebill, which is our favorite financial app here on Locked On Grizzlies. Why did Truebill change its name to Rocket Money? Well, let me tell you what we heard. Truebill is now backed by Rocket Companies and has grown from a bill management app into a full-on personal finance empowerment that helps over 3.4 million people with budgeting, with lowering their bills, canceling subscriptions, and at the end of the day, is saving over $700 a year with Rocket Money. So start canceling those unused subscriptions that you haven't used since last year and save money at rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. Again, that's rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. Or you can go to your app at your Apple store. You go to the Google Play Store and download the Rocket Money app. So now we're talking about the Grizzlies acquiring Kevin Durant. Now the question is, well, what will it take? Well, the conversation has shifted a bit since, like I said, we first talked about this more than a month ago about Kevin Durant trade talks. Well, the conversation shifted now because, one, we just mentioned, Rudy Gobert has completely reset the market. Two, we've talked to Zach Kleiman, the GM of the Memphis Grizzlies, since then. And here's the thing. This is what I've gathered from just the conversations we've had with Zach Kleiman out there in Las Vegas during Summer League and just, the Grizzlies. This isn't a reckless organization. And most of you already know that. We haven't seen the Grizzlies make these, crazy desperation trades at the NBA trading deadline under the Zach Kleiman, Taylor Jenkins regime. We haven't seen them, do those things. It's been more marginal gains in the offseason, a trade like Steven Adams for Jonas Valanciunas for Steven Adams and moves like that. DeAnthony Melton for a first-round pick that eventually became David Roddy. Those are the types of trades we've seen the Grizzlies make. Marginal moves that they believe, better fits this team and positions them for long-term success. With that being said, the trade packages that the Nets are rumored to be getting, for example, here are some of the teams. We've talked about the Toronto Raptors, Boston Celtics, Miami Heat, and the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns are rumored to have a package out there that's centered around Mikal Bridges. The Boston Celtics, if you remember, maybe a couple weeks ago, Jaylen Brown sent out a couple cryptic tweets because of the rumors that Jaylen Brown, who was arguably the best Celtics players during their NBA Final Series against the Golden State Warriors, was the player that's being offered up in a trade package to get Kevin Durant to the Boston Celtics. And then there's the Toronto Raptors. The question is if they want to give up their young, high-prized NBA Rookie of the Year, Scotty Barnes, coming off a great rookie year, helped lead that Raptors team to the NBA playoffs. The Grizzlies aren't inclined, as the Athletic reported, to offer up Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. So you may be asking, well, how? How can the Grizzlies, without those players, as we mentioned, it's easy to look at it from a Grizzlies fan perspective and say, oh, that's beautiful. We get to keep Dez, we get to keep Jaren, we keep to keep Ja, and we get KD, championship time. But you got to look at it from the Nets' perspective too. The Nets aren't going to just take anything because at the end of the day, one, they don't have to trade him right now. They can wait, let some things play out during the NBA season. A star player on another team could get hurt, and that team could become more desperate in getting involved in KD talks, or there's just a lot of things that could unfold before the Nets just make a move out of desperation. And two, if any of those rumor reports are true, where we're hearing Miami could center a package around Tyler Hero, the Suns right now, Mikal Bridges. You're hearing Jaylen Brown, who's the best player of the aforementioned guys that we've mentioned. If any of those packages are true, these are guys. Tyler Hero is sixth man of the year. Mikal Bridges is an emerging 3-and-D wing, not on the level of Tyler Hero and Jaylen Brown. And then there's Scotty Barnes, your reigning NBA Rookie of the Year, limitless potential. If the Grizzlies are to make a trade package, it's most likely going to have to start with matching money. How can the Grizzlies get up to Kevin Durant's $42.9 million salary this upcoming season? Basically, $43 million is what Kevin Durant is on the books for this upcoming season. Well, you got to start it with that Danny Green draft, with that Danny Green trade capital that the Grizzlies got back in the trade with the Sixers that shipped DeAnthony Melton to Philadelphia. So Danny Green's contract, $10 million this upcoming season. He's going to be injured for a large part of the season as well, coming off of torn ACL in the playoffs. Then you throw in Steven Adams. And this is my hypothetical trade package. Steven Adams, that's $17 million. So you combine those two, you get $27 million. Then you throw in Dillon Brooks, who's expected to make a little over $11 million this year. You're looking at about $38.4, $38.5, $38.5 million between those three players. Again, Kevin Durant is at $43 million. So once you factor in the Grizzlies have to add some young players, that will get them to the $43 million threshold plus picks. So Dillon Brooks, Steven Adams, and Danny Green makes the most sense from a salary matching perspective. And then you build from there, and then you add in possibly a Zaire Williams and a David Roddy, or Jake LaRavia, Zaire Williams, or maybe John Conchar and David Roddy. You mix and mingle those young, but I would think it's going to take someone who the Nets say, hey, we can build with this guy. The one guy on the Grizzlies roster who the Nets may be inclined to take outside of the three players, Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., who are simply not available. One guy's Zaire Williams. We've seen Zaire Williams in some league have some ups and downs, but he showed potential. I mean, his mid-range shot, his ability, to score from the three-point line. Zaire Williams has potential to be a really, really good NBA starting small forward. If the Nets think so, and if the Nets are inclined to believe that, then that's who your package is built around. Steven Adams, Dillon Brooks, and Danny Green are your salary matchers. You're going to have to get up to that $43 million threshold to make something happen. Those guys will match salary. Zaire Williams is your most attractive piece as well. And then you throw in probably one of the other guys, maybe Kennedy Chandler, maybe David Roddy or Jake LaRavia. This is simply what it's going to take. If you want to acquire a guy like Kevin Durant, this is what it takes to make it happen. This is not, some guy who you're going to get for pennies on the dollar. It's not going to happen. So if the Grizzlies were to make this happen, those are the players who would most likely be centered around the trade. And how does that package compare to some other teams? We'll find out as, over the course of the next few days as we get closer to the seasons, as more of these, trade talks become to get more advanced when it comes to Kevin Durant, who recently, about a week or two ago, Kevin Durant kind of gave the Nets sort of like an ultimatum of getting rid of Sean Marks and Steve Nash or him. And I think Joe Tsai, the Nets' owner, basically came out and backed Sean Marks and Nash, and basically saying the Nets are going to do, what's best for the organization. So with that being said, it does feel like a Kevin Durant trade will happen. When? We don't know. But the Grizzlies package, again, I think Zaire Williams, if you're not going to trade Desmond Bane, if you're not going to trade Jaren Jackson Jr., Zaire Williams, the package has to be built around him. I don't think the Nets will take a package built around a late first-round pick in Jake LaRavia or David Roddy, mid-first-round picks, that is. And I don't think, they'll take a pick built around someone else that already comes off of the Grizzlies bench. So with that being said, Zaire Williams would be the centerpiece in that trade. So if the trade does happen, where will the Grizzlies rank in the West? That's what we want to talk about, right? So we're going to do it coming up right after the break. If the Grizzlies were to trade for Kevin Durant, you're probably going to lose Zaire Williams. We've talked about Zaire Williams on Locked On Grizzlies in the past. A lot of you, you leave the comments and we listen to the reviews and the things that you say. A lot of you are big fans of Zaire Williams' potential. I think, people enjoyed watching him in Summer League, just the growth of his overall game. But if you get Kevin Durant, he's gone. Steven Adams is going to be gone as well, because that's $17 million. That's your biggest salary matching piece that you have to offer up. So if the trade package that we just discussed is the trade package that gets shipped to Brooklyn, you're talking about a new starting lineup of Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Kevin Durant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Clark. Okay, now we know Jaren Jackson Jr. is out at the start of the NBA season. So, okay, yeah, Jaren Jackson Jr. is out at the beginning of the season. How does that shift things? Well, at the end of the day, the Grizzlies will have one of their first-round picks. As we mentioned Jake LaRavia, we mentioned David Roddy. Both of those guys are interchangeable wings. This is why the Grizzlies drafted them. They wanted to be position versatile for things like this. Whereas if it's Jake LaRavia, you're more likely to play him at the 3 and then move Kevin Durant to the 4. Or if it's David Roddy, Kevin Durant will play the 3. Desmond Bane at the 2, Kevin Durant at the 3. David Roddy would more than likely be your 4. Or they could go with the vets. Xavier Tillman, Santi Aldama in his second season showed some potential as well in Summer League. But the point we're getting at, if you're noticing, is the Grizzlies would become a much more top-heavy team. The bench would become more reliant on Tyus Jones, being that facilitator, being that guy to get, those players involved. And the starters, if you have a starting lineup that features Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Kevin Durant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Clark, let me break that down to you. Ja Morant, one of the best paint-scoring point guards in the NBA. Desmond Bane, one of the greatest shooters in the NBA right now. And he's only played 2 seasons, shot over 43% from three-point range in each of his first 2 seasons at great volume as well. Kevin Durant, one of the greatest scorers that the NBA has ever seen. Jaren Jackson Jr., they call him the unicorn in Memphis. 6'11", can put the ball on the floor, can shoot the ball as well. And he's arguably, one of the better defenders in the league. First team all defense this past season. Brandon Clark, energy big, gets rebounds, extremely active on the glass, can move his feet defensively and switch out on guys, and one of the best floaters for big men from this past NBA season. His floater, in terms of volume and accuracy, was only second in the NBA behind Nikola Jokic among big men. He had the second best floater in the NBA among big men. plus his rim running and lob catching ability as well. All of that mixes together. That's like peanut butter and jelly when you mix those guys together. It's how you get your peanut butter and your jelly and you mix it together and it kind of forms that red orange color, and then when you bite it, it doesn't taste like peanut butter or jelly. It tastes like peanut butter and jelly. That's what the Grizzlies will be getting if they get that lineup. That is almost perfect sync in terms of you have Ja who's gonna put just pressure on those at the rim. You have Kevin Durant who's gonna shoot the ball extremely well. Desmond Bain is gonna shoot the ball extremely well. You have your shot creator in Kevin Durant as well. You have Jaren Jackson Jr. who's gonna space the floor, who's gonna go at smaller matchups and dominate those, but he's also going to be your anchor defensively as well. Then you have Brandon Clark, who, when any of those guys drive the basketball, he's your rim running threat. And teams, you have to account for him because he shoots over 60% from the field. It's an automatic basket if you don't account for him. A move for Kevin Durant would make the Grizzlies a surefire championship contender. So a lot of you may say, hey, we're a championship contender right now. The Grizzlies are in contention, but here's the thing. The Denver Nuggets are getting Jamal Murray back in. If you haven't seen videos of Jamal Murray this summer, might want to go see those. He looks good. The Denver Nuggets are going to get Jamal Murray back. Denver Nuggets are going to get Michael Porter Jr. back to go with the reigning two-time MVP. The Clippers are going to get Kawhi Leonard back, who Paul George recently said looks pretty much like he's in prime form. Again, scary thoughts. Along with acquiring John Wall, who, as we've watched the Clippers over the past couple seasons, most people have said point guard, having a distributor, is one of their biggest weaknesses. Well, John Wall has averaged over 9 assists in his NBA career. So the Clippers are emerging. The Nuggets will be better. On top of the Suns coming off a 64-win season, the Golden State Warriors winning the NBA championship. That's 4 right there. You combine the Timberwolves going out to get Rudy Gobert. We'll see how that works out. But again, a substantial move to get better. That's 5 teams right there. Luka Doncic in the Mavericks. They just went and got Christian Wood. They're going to get Tim Hardaway Jr. back healthy this next season to come off the bench to add to their bench depth, along with having Spencer Dinwiddie, who's going to step in and start in place of Jalen Brunson. That's 6. That's just off. That's 6 teams. That doesn't even mention the New Orleans Pelicans getting back Zion Williamson to go with CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram and that nice young rookie group they just had from last season were Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, and big Jonas Valanciunas as well. But at 7, and I'm going to stop it there. But you got the Lakers out there who have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and at some point they'll be healthy. I don't know if they'll be much of a huge threat, but they are worth mentioning because those are 2 of the greatest players in the league right now. And then you have, the Portland Trailblazers who have tried to make some moves. I don't think they'll be in that top contender status as well, but they re-signed Anthony Simons. They went out and got Jeremy Grant, and they got Josh Hart. So basically the point here is a lot of teams are making moves in the Western Conference. The Grizzlies right now are basically bringing back the same team, minus Kyle Anderson, minus DeAnthony Melton, and you're throwing in a couple younger players to replace those guys. Again, I've said this. I am a big believer. I'm a firm believer in internal growth. That's something, it's not flashy to a lot of the people out there because you don't think a lot of internal growth, happens on a lot of older teams. But with the Grizzlies having the second youngest roster in the NBA from last season, we saw Ja Morant take his second year to third year jump. We saw Desmond Bain also take a notable jump from his first season to his second season. We saw, Jaren Jackson Jr. become a first-team all-defensive player. All of these guys are under 25. We saw Zaire Williams' growth throughout the season. The Grizzlies, and this is assuming they don't trade for Kevin Durant, will have a lot of internal growth and that's going to make the team overall better. But the Grizzlies, I've said this, the Grizzlies could have a better team next season, but not have a 56-win season like they did this past season because of the competition in the West. And it all leads me back to the point is if the Grizzlies don't trade for Kevin Durant, they could be the number 1 seed. They could be the number 2 seed like they were this past season. But it's a little bit more cloudy of a picture to that happening because we just mentioned how all these other teams around the Grizzlies have made some moves to really get better. Plus the teams who haven't done a lot, like Golden State and Phoenix, are already in that top, that top elite level with the Grizzlies from this past season. So a lot of those Western Conference teams are hungry, and you don't want to get left behind or you don't want to get overlapped. That's where the Grizzlies are if they don't make a trade for Kevin Durant. If the Grizzlies were to trade for Kevin Durant, you're ensuring that we're staying at the top right now. And they are firmly putting themselves in that top 4 in the Western Conference, where pretty much it's going to be a free-for-all. As we saw this past season, the Dallas Mavericks were the 4th seed, the 5 seed, and they beat the top seeded Suns. So I think with that top 5 seeds in the West, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. They're probably all going to be close to even or just in the same stratosphere. And with that being said, the Grizzlies get Kevin Durant. They're firmly automatically in there. Ja Morant and Kevin Durant will be one of the league's best duos. And you factor in Desmond Bane, who I've always said that Desmond Bane and Ja Morant right now are turning into a top 5 backcourt in the NBA. So you talk about top 5 backcourt, then you talk about Kevin Durant, then you talk about Jaren Jackson Jr., who just a 6'11" unicorn, and you talk about Tyus Jones being one of the league's best backup point guards, the highest paid backup point guard now. There's a lot of weapons forming on this Grizzlies team. And I think if you make that trade for Kevin Durant, the Grizzlies are saying, hey, we're putting ourselves in that talk. We're putting ourselves up there with the elite of the league as a championship contender. There's a lot more to talk about when it comes to this. So first of all, we want to thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen each and every day. Next up, we could have some more Kevin Durant talk coming for you, but we also could talk about, some of the pieces on the Grizzlies that could be potentially impacted by this as well. We're going to discuss that. Before you go, make sure your second listen is getting up to date with the latest news going on in the NBA with Locked On NBA. Again, Locked On NBA, that's your daily NBA update, and it only takes 30 minutes. That's the best part about Locked On NBA, because you can go see what's going on around the entire league. And again, Locked On NBA, if you're a Grizzlies fan, Locked On NBA is a crucial listen, because that's where you can go hear what these other teams are doing to acquire Kevin Durant. Again, we mentioned the Miami Heat, we mentioned the Toronto Raptors, the Phoenix Suns, the Boston Celtics. Locked On NBA, in just 30 minutes of your day, we'll have you covered with what other franchises are doing as well. And you can see where the Grizzlies stack up from the Kevin Durant sweepstakes, as well as the competition perspective as being a championship contender. But thank you again for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you continue to like, subscribe, comment to all of our content. We see your reviews and we appreciate them, and we will take all of that into consideration with our further coverage. Again, we appreciate you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. I'll see you next time.